So my name is Graham Lawler, and I am the founder of Ultralight Startups, and I run all the events here in New York City. I'm here with my partner, Chris DeLuca, who is from Boston and runs all of our events and the Boston chapter. So thanks, Chris, for joining us, for coming down. Here's the agenda for today. Chris, you want to take us through that?
Sure, thanks, Graham. So in a moment, we'll get into introductions, introducing the panel, and then we'll move into 8 pitches. You're going to hear from 8 emerging early-stage startups in the energy sector tonight, and then we'll move into audience voting, so you'll be able to vote on your favorite pitches as well as your favorite panelists. And so make sure you grab a program which has all the details of who the companies are presenting tonight, so you can take notes and follow along. And then right around 8:45, when we wrap up, we'll move over to the Heartland Brewery, which will be able to continue the conversation and have networking and discussion. So hopefully you can all join us. And Graham, would you like to go into how those 8 companies were selected?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. So we received applications from 169 companies to present here today. And we went through a selection process to get down to the 8 that you'll see tonight. So firstly, we filtered for early stage companies. So any company that applied that has raised venture capital was eliminated. So we were only looking for early stage companies that have not raised a Series A round of venture capital yet. And then we took the companies that were in that early stage and we invited them onto a crowd voting portal so they could all invite their friends and family and supporters to vote for them. And the 2 companies that got the most votes on our crowd voting portal got automatic spots to present tonight. And those 2 are marked in your programs. They're Fulcrum Solar and cost-effective carbon capture. And then the final 6 companies were picked by our selection committee. We try and find a cross-section of companies in different sectors within energy and clean tech. And all of the 8 finalists received coaching from our pitch coach, Mac Lipscomb. So next I would like to introduce our investor panel. So starting on my far right, your far left, we'll go in alphabetical order with Tom Blum. So for each panelist, the way the introduction is going to work, tell us a little bit about your firm and tell us about the most recent energy or clean tech investment that you made and why you are so excited about it. So Tom, go ahead and tell us about New York Angels.
Yes, I'm Tom Blum, and in my day job, I'm an investment banker covering clean tech and alternative energy. But my hobby is with the New York Angels. I've been a member for 10 years, done about 25 investments, and several in the clean tech sector through the New York Angels, which is a very active 100-member group that funds our early-stage startup companies all across the country, but we're all based here in New York. My latest investment in clean tech is Locus Energy, a company that captures data off of solar fields and presents it over the web to the owners of those projects.
And why are you so excited about that particular project, Tom?
The company is, in essence, a data management company, and I think the smart web and data management has a better ratio of having a small investment with a potential payoff. So I like the capital efficiency of that business.
Excellent. Okay, thanks so much, Tom. So Andrew, your second time here at Future Energy. You want to tell us about New Venture Partners and your most recent investment?
Yeah, New Venture Partners is a early-stage venture capital firm. We have our latest fund is a $300 million fund. A lot of people know us because we used to be the venture arm of Bell Labs, so that explains why we're based in New Jersey, of all places. New Jersey is that state on the other side of the Hudson, if you're not quite sure. The last investment that I made was in a coating material which could be applied to solar panels to increase the amount of incident radiation that's absorbed by the panel. And it's really exciting because we're not trying to compete against all the Chinese solar PV and American solar PV producers. We're trying to sell arms to them at very high margins with great capital efficiency.
I'm noticing a theme here. Willem Rensink from Shell GameChanger. You want to tell us about GameChanger?
Yeah, so my name is Willem Rensink. I work for Shell, which is of course a major oil company. But why we're here is really to sort of connect to the entrepreneurial community in clean tech in here, sort of the Northeast, New York, Boston corridor. That's why we work with Graham and Chris. So GameChanger is the early stage incubator of novel radical innovations technologies for Shell that we try to bring to a proof of concept. So one of the recent things we have done is invested in a real alternative way to make gas to chemicals, gas to liquids, which is of course a very important area for Shell. As you see the current gas boom, and you tend to find more gas than oil. So if you can monetize that towards liquids in a more scaled down version than currently is possible, it's very attractive potentially. And as a major, more capital-intensive company, we're not terribly worried about capital intensity, because in the end, the infrastructure is going to be expensive anyway.
Hi, I'm Mark Wight. I'm with GE Ventures. GE is in partnership with ConocoPhillips and NRG Energy in a clean venture fund. We've been together for the past 2 years, have over 40 companies in our portfolio. GE is really looking at the clean tech space from a disruptive technology area and how those disruptive technologies can impact our business units. So one of the last investments we made was a company called Pendulum. It's a wind LiDAR system, up tower. And interestingly enough, a lot of the cost in large wind turbines come from the rigidity and the structure to deal with large wind bursts and gusts. So if you can figure out when those gusts are coming and kind of turn the turbine and deal with those, you can take a lot of cost out of the turbine. So it's a way that we're working with that company to see if we can figure out a way to take cost out.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mark. So, Chris, you want to tell us about the pitch format?
Sure, thanks, Graham. So the pitch format for tonight, each company of the 8 will have 9 minutes total dedicated time up here. 3 minutes are pitch, so it's a monologue pitch coming from the entrepreneur to the panel, and that's a hard cut at 3 minutes. Take note. And then there's 3 minutes of question and answer. So these are questions coming from the panel, giving the opportunity to the presenter to answer that, and that goes on for another 3 minutes. And then the final round is really, 3 minutes of advice. So this is really a chance for the entrepreneur to listen to this expert panel to give them takeaway information. We're actually asking the panel to put themselves in the shoes of the entrepreneur to say, what would you do if you were this entrepreneur? What would you do to change the company and take it to the next level? So it's 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes. And for the feedback, there's no response from the entrepreneur, so it's just takeaway advice. They don't have a chance to respond to that. And then for audience voting, so as mentioned, there's a contest going on here tonight. So right around 8:30, you'll receive an email from us. So hopefully you have your smartphones with you, and you'll get a form. You'll be able to select your top favorite companies as well as your favorite panelists up here. So there's 2 competitions. You're voting for your favorite companies and your favorite panelists, keeping everything competitive. And this is what they're competing for tonight. So a free application to CleanTech Open, a 1-month co-working pass to NYC Acre, an interview with Surge Accelerator down in Houston, Texas, and then $1,000 worth of credits to Amazon Web Services. And of course, as mentioned, the ultimate prize, the Audience Choice Award for the panel, and bragging rights for the panel as well. And now into the pitches. Graham, do you want to tell us about?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we get into our first pitch, I would like to thank a number of people that have made this event possible. We'll be hearing from a few of our sponsors later, but just to mention them now, Willem, Rensink and Shell GameChanger, Dan Spitzer and Hudson Russ, Mike Shimazu and NYSERDA, Alp Tilev and Microsoft, who I saw here a moment ago. Some of the community and media partners that have brought in all of you and our companies and the 169 applicants, NYC Acre, Action, Agrion, Business Incubator Association of New York State, David Hockman, CBIP, CleanTech Open, Co-Founders Lab, the Energy Collective, ePowerhouse, Green Capital Empire, Uveni, and our pitch coach, Mac Lipscomb, who I don't believe is here right now. And I would like to thank all of the 8 presenters for participating with us today. So our first pitcher is Elon Rubin of Fulcrum Solar. So Elon, come on up.
Good evening.
You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Elon Rubin. I am General Counsel and Director of Business Development at Fulcrum Solar. So I wanted to start out with a scenario. If I give you a diagram to set something up, and that diagram has 100 parts on it, and there's many steps to set it up, By a show of hands, how many people think this will be easy to set up? I don't see too many. But this is what solar is like set up in remote applications. Fulcrum has developed a easy-to-install plug-and-play solar power generating unit that enables reliable and cost-effective electrification in remote applications. I previously worked at the US Department of Energy, and I realized that there's a market opportunity for an easy-to-install solar power generating unit. And I asked customers and experts, what are the problems? And there are two problems. The first is that solar is inefficient, expensive, and unreliable because of lack of expertise. And the second is that fuel is expensive and difficult to transport. So we've developed a unit with unique characteristics that addresses these problems. It's a 1.8 kilowatt plug-and-play solar power generating unit. It comes in segments, so it's easy to transport. You click a button to deploy the unit, unfold, and plug in. There's a battery, and there's a tracking option. And I think it has really unique characteristics that set it apart from incumbent technology. It's modular, it's standardized, so it reduces costs. It's pre-configured, so there's no expertise required. It's portable, and it's easily installed. So we have 3 systems deployed with a second site with 5 units coming online. And we've gotten real interest in this because it solves real problems and has great economic value. It's the cheapest off-grid solar solution, and it breaks even with a diesel generator within 8 to 11 months and pays for itself within 2 to 3 years. The chart over there, basically, it shows, on the one hand, Fulcrum, that's the cost avoided by our unit, and diesel is the cost of the fuel itself. Now the question is, how are we going to get there? We're going to have channel partners and strategic partners, and the customers are listed above. We plan to sell upfront or with a lease, depending on the financial partners. So I want to end with a question, and this question is going to test if everybody was paying attention. So compared to the first scenario I said earlier, would it be easier to install a unit that's pre-configured and all you have to do to set it up is click a button, unfold, and plug in by a show of hands? So that means you'll have to vote for me. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Ian. Can you hang out up here? And take some questions.
Okay, so we're going to move right into the question answer section. So we'll start down the end with Tom. Tom, dig into it. What questions would you like to ask Elon?
Tell me how much market testing you've done to see the benefits of having a tracker versus just having fixed panels.
So the tracker is going to be for more localized off-grid applications. The benefit is that you get 20 to 30% more output, which increases the economic value. The downside is that if it's in a really remote application, it might cause some troubleshoot issues. So I would recommend the tracking for more national off-grid solutions and non-tracking for international solutions.
Take a question from Andrew.
Can I ask a two-part question here?
No.
Is the expectation that the consumer will install this themselves?
We've designed it so that it's incredibly easy to set up, and that's actually the problem right now in these off-grid situations is that they don't have the expertise to set it up.
Yeah. So let me do a market test here. I know probably most people are New Yorkers and live in apartments, but everybody in the room assume you have your own place that you need to acquire power for. How many people, at some reasonable price, whatever the pricing of this is, would consider installing themselves their own power generator?
I guess I'll sit down right now then.
Yeah.
Next question. Go ahead, Willem.
So what's your battery technology that you link up to the panels, and is that in your cost savings compared to the diesel?
So we're in late stage commercialization, and the supply chain is still flexible. But what we've been using is a dry cell battery, and it's actually more expensive than lead acid. But in these applications, it has better reliability. So yeah.
But so was that included in your cost model?
Oh no, it is included in the cost. When the cost that you pay comes with everything. It's ready to go.
Do you have any IP, and what's to block other racking people from trying to duplicate this?
Right. So yes, we have IP. We're late stage patent pending, and in terms of erecting barriers, I could say, well, first, we're going to be first to market in this area. And second, my engineer's right here. He's in the audience. And it's a very intimate and long process. I mean, at the end of the day, if GE wanted to take this and do this right now, you probably have the engineers to do so. But we plan to be first to market. And we have late-stage patent pending.
Okay, so that's it for questions. So let's move right down to the end. Back to you, Tom. So put yourself in the shoes of Elon here. What would you like to give him from advice?
Well,
send him off.
Getting patents would be very important because this is an easy system to copy. You're not making the panels, the batteries. You're just assembling it, and there are people who can be ruthless in cutting costs. So my other advice is go for design. I think people in the end want and appreciate good design over the cheapest system that's available.
Feedback, Andrew?
Yeah, I know this is intended to be off grid, but a huge amount of the solar installations are, do plug into the grid because of the economic advantages to the consumer to sell back in the grid. So you see in states like California and even New Jersey a tremendous amount of activity happening. So I would consider whether being pure off grid is the best entry strategy or not. I don't know the answer to that. And secondly, you're going to need a ton of money. Because you're really creating an expensive consumer product and building expensive consumer channel and require expensive promotion and advertising to the consumer. So I don't think this is the kind of thing where you raise $1 million and bootstrap your way up. I think it's the kind of thing where you really need tens of millions of dollars to get a start in this and big channel partners.
Feedback, Willem?
Yeah, so to me the solution sounds very appropriate for Africa, or where people are more of a need for off-grid power. But then again, where the cost that what you're offering, whether that's enough of a differentiator to sort of get in that, as you're so dependent on the difficult components. So I think getting enough demonstration projects going through NGOs or going that route rather than the capital-intensive route, I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah, my suggestion is kind of similar to Andrew. I think you probably want to think about a manufacturing partner instead of trying to do it yourself. And also, if you are trying to go after Africa and those types of locations, many times they can't afford anything. So trying to figure out a way to finance it, hook up with World Bank or some other of those institutions that can help foster the delivering to those types of end customers that need it.
Great feedback. Well done. Round of applause for Elon. Okay.
Thank you, Elon. Okay, so next up we have Eric First of Cost-Effective Carbon Capture. And on deck we have Blue Crump of Uvest Solar. Go ahead, Eric. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Eric First. I'm a doctoral student from Princeton University. Over the past 4 years, my thesis research has focused on studying materials for selective separations in chemistry. When I started working with my co-inventor, Dr. Farouk Hassan, last year, who is an expert in designing efficient separation processes, we made an incredible discovery. By combining our material and process-centric viewpoints, we were able to create a new, cost-effective carbon capture technology, and we are excited to be taking it to market. Here's the problem that we face. A typical 500 megawatt coal-fired power plant produces 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide every day. And since current carbon capture systems are expensive, the CO2 is released into the atmosphere where it contributes to global climate change. We have developed a unique computational screening method that combines selection of the material with optimization of the chemical process. We're basing this on a technology known as adsorption, which is currently used in oil refineries and ammonia production. Now, the way this works is the exhaust from a power plant passes through a column that's packed with a molecular sieve, known as a zeolite, that can selectively filter out the CO2. The challenge is that there are thousands of zeolites to choose from, and it's critical to select the best one for a cost-effective process. Our computational screening method is able to identify the best material from a database of many different zeolites. In fact, by screening through databases of zeolites, we've been able to identify several that are much cheaper than any other material that's been previously considered. In fact, an adsorption process using our best zeolite is 25% cheaper than any other technology, which would save a typical power plant $30 million per year on carbon capture costs. By optimizing the adsorption process, we minimize the investment and operating costs while ensuring that at least 90% of the CO2 is captured at high purity. Clearly, we have an attractive proposition for power plants, given that we have the cheapest carbon capture option available. We've obtained provisional patent protection for this work, and we're ready to license the technology. Additionally, since the materials that we've discovered are not currently used commercially, there's an additional opportunity to partner with a manufacturer. But carbon capture is just the beginning. Our computational screening method is general, and it can be applied to any molecular separation to design cost-effective processes. We've already been in discussions with companies interested in applications like natural gas purification, which is becoming increasingly important as we look towards domestic energy sources. A key value that we offer is the ability to customize our method for a customer's particular application and discover new materials and design optimized adsorption processes to achieve the lowest possible cost. We anticipate additional patents based on these other applications.
And time.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move right into the questions. I'll ask you to hold your applause. So let's start with you, Mark, sorry. So Mark, what questions would you like to ask of Eric?
My first question is on the carbon capture market size. How big is that? And it sounds like what I read, that the use was more for enhanced oil recovery.
Yes. So in terms of the carbon capture market here in the United States, the most likely utilization of the CO2 would be in enhanced oil recovery. And according to the Department of Energy, the CO2 used in enhanced oil recovery currently goes for up to $38 per ton. So you could actually make a profit by capturing the CO2 and selling it for that application. Elsewhere around the world, many countries have carbon taxes. So for example, just north in British Columbia, there's a $30 per ton carbon tax. Australia also has a similar carbon tax. And so depending on the regulatory environment, there might also be an economic incentive to capture carbon as well.
Next question, Willem.
What's your method for desorbing the CO2 in the column?
So the way the adsorption process works is the gas from the power plant passes through the column at an adsorption pressure. And this allows the CO2 to be basically attached onto the zeolite. We can then drop the pressure and the CO2 desorbs from the material, allowing it to automatically regenerate. And the material can undergo many, many adsorption-desorption cycles in this manner. Typically, zeolites are used maybe for up to a year before they need to be replaced.
Next question, Andrew.
Have you thought about a business model? How do you plan to make money?
Yes. So one option is certainly to license the use of the materials that we've discovered. But as I had mentioned as well, the zeolites that we've discovered are not currently being used commercially. Zeolite synthesis is a $2 billion a year industry. And by coming up with uses for some of these zeolites that are not currently being used, it's going to create another opportunity to actually manufacture these materials and sell them directly to the power plants in order to be used in the system.
Aren't the materials controlled by the mines? Or the mining companies?
No, so the zeolites that we're proposing are actually synthetic materials. There are naturally occurring zeolites, but we actually propose synthetic zeolites. The synthesis for these materials is known. It's a matter of scaling up the manufacturing to a large scale.
I wasn't clear from your material. Have you already settled on one particular chemical to do for the zeolite and you want to now commercialize that? Or it seemed more that you just had a protocol for how to search and evaluate and come up with things that might work?
Yeah, we actually have both. So specifically for carbon capture, we've identified several different materials that outperform all of the materials that are currently being considered for carbon capture. And so the provisional patent that we have actually covers those specific materials. But it also covers the method that we use to discover these materials. And like I had mentioned, this method is general. It's not specific to carbon capture. We can apply it to other applications as well, and that's what we're currently working on.
Okay, so now let's move right into the feedback or advice. So coming back down the line, Mark. Takeaway advice, putting yourself in Eric's shoes. What would you like to recommend here?
I'd recommend trying to get a pilot up and running as soon as possible, and then probably trying to partner with a large chemical or distribution type company that can help if you're going to go the licensing route. So getting them involved early so that they can help you.
Yeah, as you're in a very early stage, I assume that your cost estimation is relatively rough. So if you had 25% cost savings, I'm not convinced that's enough for the stage that you're in, because carbon capture is a very, very limited market right now. So you say carbon capture is just the beginning. I'd say carbon capture is the end, and the other applications that you have are probably more valuable and more realistic in the short term to develop. Although I think that the space itself is quite competitive, you know, with metallo-organic frameworks, quite a few startup companies there. So just try to find a differentiator, and I think that's where you have an easier access to a market. And if you want to stick to the CO2, I think finding a play where you can sort of do a CO2 recycling or having a use and creating that partnership, I think gives you a better opportunity than just going for CO2 capture.
So I'm going to double down on Willem's comment. I don't think there's going to be a market for CO2 capture. And you know, utilities are notoriously difficult to sell to, and something that may reduce their cost may be actually irrelevant to them because of the rate-based structure that utilities work under. And so until there's a point where there's either state or federal regulation that absolutely requires a coal-fired plant to capture its CO2, it's very unlikely to happen at commercial scale. And if such regulation happens, you'd have to be worried that actually they'll just stop burning the coal and start burning natural gas instead. So I think I wouldn't invest any serious amount of money in the CO2 capture market now until you see how that market evolves, because it's way too soon and likely may never develop at all. And I'd encourage you to look at some of the other applications.
So I agree with those points. Carbon capture is not something that will attract money because there's no visibility towards when that's a commercial product. But what you mentioned about cleaning natural gas, that's a huge market, and you'd probably find some people on this panel grabbing you to find out how they can tap into your brain. Your challenge, therefore, is protecting and being able to monetize these inventions, which could have very broad application, but I don't think you're the guy who's going to build the company that's going to be selling to the power industry or to the oil and gas industry. You got to think about what's business and what do you want to get out of this business.
Great feedback. Nice job, Eric. Round of applause. Well done. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So the next presenter is Blue Crump from Uvest Solar. Get your slides up. So you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Blue Crump with Uvest Solar. Uvest is a crowdfunding platform for all things energy. We essentially are combining crowdfunding as a portal for energy projects with project ownership. Uvest essentially works with accredited investors to raise capital, combining that with project equity so that we in turn can build projects specifically with solar. Under our model, crowdfund investors earn 5 to 7% returns, generally on a energy or a solar power energy note. And we own the projects over a long-term power purchase agreement. Under that long-term ownership, our returns typically fall between the 33 and 37% returns over that 20-year revenue stream. Having spent most of my career in renewable energy, I've seen two things that were very distinct. Success in very small projects as well as very large projects. Solar City, for example, has done a tremendous amount of work in the smaller solar sector from project ownership, having just recently received $500 million from Goldman Sachs. And then on the larger utility scale, which I've also worked in projects of that size, you've seen Warren Buffett at the 2.5+ billion range. Most people don't know that 75% of residential solar is third-party owned and about 40% of commercial solar is third-party owned. Those two things combined, you see that the true value is in project ownership as well as in sourcing that with essentially low-interest debt financing, which is how we're approaching crowdfunding. We're offering an impact investment for the crowd for them to come in, say 60, 36, 60 to 120-month note. giving them a decent return on that investment, and essentially building projects within their community. So they can make a correlation and make a connection with the project that they invest in, as long as the project that's within their community. So there's really two sort of principal streams of revenue in our projects. We have projects that we source, essentially projects that are brought to us by solar developers that we choose to own. And then we also have projects that are brought to us by energy developers who are looking for a mechanism to finance those projects. In that regard, the comparison I like to use is it's Solar City meets Kickstarter. In that regard, we're not donation-based. We're essentially taking a fee for raising this capital for these energy projects. And at the same time, we're choosing the projects that we want to own for ourselves that fit our portfolio of the projects that we want to build in that revenue stream.
10 seconds.
We act as a micro utility, essentially billing for the sale of the utility of the projects with long-term energy projects.
And time. Okay, so let's move into the questions. Back to you, Tom, down the end. What would you like to ask?
Welcome to the world of solar finance and development. So the crowdfunding is very popular these days, and yes, 5-7% fixed rate debt is cheap. What's your next best cost of funding? If crowdsourcing were to collapse tomorrow, who would you go to, and how much more would that cost?
If the crowdsourcing capital were to collapse, and it's important to mention that we're only crowdsourcing a portion of that, and that we're going to use project equity for the remaining, we would go towards typically for bank lending, which is going to cost us closer to 10% versus the 5 to 7.
So I have to, my first question is, your name really Blue Crump?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. My second question is,
Awesome name.
I got a kind of a queasy feeling when I first saw this, because you see the company making 33% annual returns, and then the sort of unwashed, naive, and public making 5%, and so how would, if the public knows you're making those returns and they're making their returns at such a different level, how do you explain that to them without sounding like you're taking advantage of them?
Well, essentially, we'll offer them a note that can beat Treasury. So, buying notes is not uncommon, and essentially, they're only going to say under that scenario, maybe finance 30 to 40% of the project. The remainder is our project equity. So we retain all of the incentives, state, federal, all of the renewable energy credits if they apply in the particular state where we're working and what have you. And then we essentially offer the host a long-term energy partnership. They buy the power from us at a lower cost with a low escalator, and they always float below what the current utility rates are charging them. So it provides a service to the host, which in many cases is a nonprofit. Perhaps it's a school, perhaps it's a business in your community.
Go ahead, Willem.
So how many projects have you lined up so far that you say would be ready to go? Or what stage is sort of your, are you ready to receive funding right now?
We're ready to receive funding. We essentially are trying to launch with our portal with about 4 to 6 projects. We have 3 of those projects secured with LOIs that we can move forward. Those 3 happen to all be schools, but we have others that are for-profit. Schools are a great scenario because they're nonprofits. They don't have a way to capture they don't have a tax appetite, so they can't capture many of the incentives associated with solar.
Question mark.
So the tax equity and all the incentives stay with your company. They don't get flowed down to the crowdsourced person.
That's correct. For the crowdsourced person, it's essentially buying a note the same way they would buy any debenture note.
And you have access to enough tax equity to monetize that?
We did. That was one of the largest parts of us ramping up, is to secure tax equity partners. And in some cases, in some scenarios, where we crowdfund a large portion of the project, because we can move the scale between how much is crowdfunded, we can essentially absorb that tax credit and use it as well. But we have tax equity partners in place.
Okay, so let's move into the feedback and advice. So, Tom, what would you like to send Blue on his way with?
Yes, as long as you have backup, because crowdfunding, while it's a great idea, it's still unproven. It's still a young idea that could backfire or could end if, because any good idea can be ruined if somebody goes in and does a deal that collapses. The other is, I deal with a lot of solar developers, and I haven't had a single one come in talking about 30% returns on projects. So I think you need to go and re-examine your numbers, because I'm hearing like returns in the 12, 13% ranges, and I don't, outside of Hawaii, I just don't think the high returns are available.
Advice, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty attractive business, and I definitely think it's worth pursuing. I'll just go back to my thought that, let's say there were a journalist in the room and heard your answer to my question, they'd probably kill you, because in terms of bad publicity, because there has to be a very simple explanation to the guy at Indiegogo or wherever, what the basis of his returns are that comforts him, that his sort of quasi-philanthropic, community-based investment is not going to sort of enrich these Wall Street sharks who are taking all their returns home with them. Yeah.
Go ahead, Willem.
Yes, I think for the crowdfunding to really work, I think that the link to a community or people sort of being frustrated that they don't see enough green energy projects being developed around them as saying a lever, okay, then if nobody wants to finance it for us, let's do it together. And I think that's the only link where you have to be very, very strong and very local. And then the question, if you have to be that local, how do you then scale that business and still deliver the quality? Because then all of a sudden you get a lot of moving pieces rather than doing a few big projects. And I think that's the only reason why you get a compelling proposition to an investor, other than for them to pick a traditional green investment.
Advice, Mark.
Yeah, I think I'd piggyback on that, is to ensure that you have a very differentiated, simple message that why someone shouldn't go with a Solar City or another larger player or even a larger installer who has the capability to bring the Sunrun financing. So having that simple message on why you're differentiated would be helpful.
And great advice. So well done, Blue. Round of applause. Congratulations.
Thanks so much, Blue. The last pitch before the break is going to be David Mahfouda of Bandwagon. Do you have 3 minutes?
Great, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is David Mahfouda, and I'm the founder and CEO of Bandwagon. At Bandwagon, we believe that shared taxis are the future of public transportation. Now, the New York City taxi and limousine system is currently the 7th largest public transportation system in the United States, and its utilization is around 30% right now. So that means that 1 out of every 3 seats in taxis is actually occupied when taxis are moving around the city. So this causes 2 problems for urban passengers. 1, it means that you're overpaying for your seat. And 2, many of you have experienced this before, it means that sometimes it's very difficult to find a taxi. So prime example is the taxi line outside of LaGuardia Airport, where multiple planes arrive all at the same time and there just aren't enough taxis to service that demand. So at Bandwagon, what we're doing is basically reselling this excess capacity. We're building ride-sharing software. The key, however, to taxi sharing software, to reselling excess capacity, is the ride batch server. Our ride batch server allows us to identify complementary itineraries and combine them gracefully. And this server powers both of our products. So the first product that I want to talk about is called the Hop Lane. You see a picture of it there over on the top of the screen. It's a physical installation at LaGuardia Airport that allows passengers to identify the best passenger to share with based on destination. So we can guarantee you that you're not going to go more than 3 minutes out of your original journey by sharing with another passenger. Furthermore, so our relationship with LaGuardia Airport has made it such that we're actually able to allow sharing passengers to hop up to the front of the line if they're interested in sharing, similar to the incentives that HOV lanes offer sharing passengers and other kinds of vehicles. So our second product is called Bandwagon. They're related products. Bandwagon organizes shared rides to LaGuardia Airport. It utilizes the same ride batch server. And on both of these products, in general, we're saving passengers about 40% per trip. We have a full patent on the Hop Lane technology for batch-based queuing. From the airport, we've already generated 300 shared rides for an aggregate customer savings of $10,000. And we've generated about 100 rides with our mobile and web technology. So next slide. So the market for this is huge. Conservatively, it's a $10 billion market in the United States for for for-hire vehicles. New York City is a $3 billion market, so that means that $2 billion of empty seats are wasted every year in New York City. Our business model is very straightforward. We purchase trips from car services. We break those trips up into individual seats. We mark up the price of the seats, and then we resell those seats to sharing passengers. Relative to our competition, again, our competitive advantage is very straightforward. We're third as expensive as UberX, and we're 3 times faster to get to the airport than Super Shuttle. So we're currently raising $200,000 in bridge notes, and we will be expanding to 5 additional cities on a Series A round starting this fall.
In time. Okay, so right here, Mark, what would you like to ask questions of?
Yeah, so does this overall, do you reduce the market size of the taxis because they need to then share their rides?
Ultimately, I think no. The people that we're stealing market share from are single occupancy vehicles, people that are driving. And we're also pulling from Super Shuttle, we're pulling from public transportation, so we're really stealing from all the transportation markets.
Okay, as a follow-up, you may want to think about how you get the taxis to want to jump instead of push back.
Yeah, sure. So we've done a lot of thinking about this. So the drivers actually make more money on our shared trips. So we work with drivers. We've done a lot of driver interviews. We also work with livery companies. The livery sell is very direct. We're just an additional customer for liveries. We can bring them a segment of the market that they don't currently have access to.
And so you mentioned you buy taxi trips. So can you always sell those, or can you also have? So what's your sort of downside in buying those trips?
Yeah, so we lose money on some of our trips. But we lose money on the single passenger trips. We have a bunch of ways that we work around having to eat too much of those costs. We work with third-party resellers to basically sell empty seats on trips that we've already sold to our customers. We also have these complex corridors that help us constrain demand so that we know that we're not going to be selling too many seats outside of the area in which we think really strongly that we're going to be able to fill these vehicles. And then obviously we make 80% revenue, an additional 80% revenue on the trips that we put 3 passengers in.
And so your pictures show quite a bit of infrastructure required to sort of set it up. So is that always required, or how much do you actually physically need to put in place to sort of plan out your routes?
Sure. So we really like the infrastructure because we're teaching passengers a new behavior, and we think high touch is really important initially to get passengers into vehicles together. From an investor's perspective, I want to assure you that this is not a high-cost approach, even though it is a high-infrastructure approach. We're going to be working with, and we already have offers from advertising and digital signage providers who actually want to finance these signs for us because it's a venue for them to resell additional advertising.
Are you limited to places like transportation hubs, airports, train stations, and so on, because you need a certain critical mass of people there all the time, or does it scale to beyond that?
So the term that we like is critical density, because the denominator is really important also. But so initially, initially yes, but in the long term, no. So most of the volume in New York City, most of the predictable volume in New York City is moving to and from airports and transportation hubs. We also think events are a great market, ball games, concerts. But eventually, we really do see this as an ubiquitous distributed transportation platform. And we've run the numbers on the FOIL data. We can get there. Just initially, we need to be focused on these hubs.
Final question from Tom.
What a fantastic idea. So tell us how you got this through the TLC and LaGuardia Airport for such a brilliant idea. And then secondly, if I'm a user, how long in advance do I have to key in that I'm interested in a share ride, and how long will I have to wait around till I get in a cab?
So to answer the first question, this was actually a policy that the TLC initially proposed and was failing. And we had independently developed our technology and actually went to the TLC and said, hey, you have a great policy, but it's failing because you have no service design and you have no technology supporting it. So the TLC was actually the party that made the introduction to the Port Authority in the first place. And then in response to your second question, the system at the airport is a real-time system. So we built it that way on purpose because people don't want to wait around for a shared ride. In fact, when you're waiting in line, all you want to do is get to the front of the line. And so we built our service around that idea. So instead of waiting for a share, you actually get priority access for sharing. And it's actually obviously very powerful. If you see 2 people move up to the front of the line, we've done this. Everybody in line wants to share their ride, unsurprisingly.
Okay, so Tom, let's stick with you. So why don't you go right into the advice or feedback, and what would you like to recommend here?
So I love this idea. I think as a business, the question is, can you really make enough? Is is it worth the effort? Are you protected as the agent? Do you sign a long-term contract to have an exclusive right at the airports? That would add a lot of value to your company.
I got the sense when you started and from reading the materials that your number one value proposition was cost savings. And instinctively, for me, it would be, jumping the queue and getting there faster. If I could do an audience poll again and you had a choice between having your time and having your cost, who would have their time? And who would have their cost? And I think that sort of confirms that maybe where the value proposition is. So then my question is, or I don't have advice, it's how do you think about being a victim of success where everybody jumps in the line and then all of a sudden the value proposition disappears?
So I was flying in this morning in Newark from Houston, and I know, if you book a flight on United to Newark, they say there's an in-train connection. So that's so I asked a cab driver, is that convenient to take the train rather than cab? Of course, he says, well, who's paying for the trip? Well, it's a company, so I don't really care about cost at that point. So I agree is that you have to be careful that a lot of people, especially when business travelers, the company pays for it, and there's not necessarily an incentive on cost. Whereas if it's about time and speed, and so I agree is that's your key value proposition. And again, my concern would be how labor intensive is it to really build up these corridors where you can build up demand if you want to scale, if you go to different cities. And so really what's your growth model and how much attention to detail you have to find to a particular route where the concept will work, like in this case in New York LaGuardia, because apparently there's a pain point that you can lever, whereas all the airports might not have that, and then it might be more difficult to break in. So local knowledge to grow, I think, is going to be key.
Final feedback, Mark?
Yeah, I would think about a net promoter score and really leverage your initial people who are trying it and loving it to help you figure out where to go next. Where would those people like the next one to be, and where would they use it next? And that's what I would do, is really mine them, get them on your team, and help them grow.
Thanks so much.
Great job. Congratulations. Round of applause.
Thank you, David. Okay, so one quick question. Do we have a Scott Banta from ElectricBio Technologies in the audience? Excellent. Thank you so much. So I'm going to make a couple of announcements here. First, we'll hear from Willem about GameChanger and our platinum sponsor and enabling sponsor of Future Energy.
So I see, okay. Yeah, so I'm with the Shell GameChanger team, and what we do, we offer an opportunity to work with external technology providers that want to develop their technology. That typically is for us in a very early stage. Typically ideas have to be relatively radical, novel ideas, novel approaches that warrant some incubation for us. There needs to be some relevance to the Shell businesses, and then we help with a collaborative partnership, typically collaborative research, develop a proof of concept that then allows you to further work with the Shell businesses afterwards. So we try to build up what's relevant for a company like Shell to see in that technology, and it can be any type of partnership. Shell also started a technology venture arm again, so we try to align with the early stage and then be able to hand off those technologies to the venture arm and work a collaborative program out of the technology. So we attract ideas. You can go up to me if you have a good idea and say, want some feedback, is that something that Shell's interested in? We also try to connect technologies to people. If it's not revolutionary, not for us, we might know people. There's no guarantees there, but we might know people that actually are looking for that type of technology. We also have a web portal, which is shell.com/GameChanger, where you can directly submit your idea to us, and then you always get, at a minimum, an email back to say that's something that fits our criteria or not.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Willem. And we have a number of gold sponsors. So Dan Spitzer from Hodgson Russ. You want to come up and tell us about your program?
Sure. Where do you want me?
Just right here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us. On behalf of Hodgson Russ, we're delighted to take over as sponsor of this program. We've been working with startup companies a long time, a really long time. Like before the telegraph was invented, we were working with startup companies. And we're still working with startups. It's a great pleasure for us. It's to work with young companies and with new ideas and with technology. I wanted to mention, too, that We have an event as part of New York Energy Week that we're doing with Graham called Rise of the Clean Web, and it's really aimed not at the investment community, but at you companies out there that are looking to learn some free advice, some free legal advice, some free other advice about the kind of things you should be doing in starting up the company, dealing with patents, some other things. So if you click on New York Energy Week, I think there's still some spaces available for that. We'd love to see you there. And talk to us, my partners, Maureen, Margaret, and Alba here as well. We do a lot of work with startups. We recognize the fiscal constraints that you're under, and we try to work with you to make sure that you get proper advice going forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dan. So our next sponsor is also our host here today, which is Microsoft, and I think I saw Alp Tilev. Awesome. Of BizSpark.
Yes. Hi guys. It's hard to imagine this was a startup once, but I work for them, and then I work with startups. So if you're interested in have anything with your product that Luke has Microsoft on its roadmap at some point, come find me after. I'll be here. Not too long after, but I'll be here. And Bandwagon, I need that on the Windows Phone. Where are you guys? I don't know, but yeah, definitely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Al. So NYSERDA is also a gold sponsor, and they're not here today, I don't think, Mike Shimazu. So I'm going to give their pitch. NYSERDA is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. NYSERDA's aim is to help New Yorkers meet their energy goals, reducing energy consumption, promoting the use of renewable energy sources, and protecting the environment. NYSERDA sponsors 6 energy and clean tech incubators throughout New York State, all of which have sent companies to apply to past future energy events. Today we have Bandwagon, which you just heard from. David Mahfouda is a member of New York City Acre, a NYSERDA-funded incubator here in New York. So thanks very much to NYSERDA for sponsoring this event as well. I would like to point out a few of our preferred service providers. Joseph McElroy of Corporate Performance Artists provides community and inbound marketing. Jack Petrie, and I think it's going to be Michael Coe, is right back here with Office Lease Center, which is a broker for office space for startups. And James Joy, who may or may not be here right now, with Summit, which provides tax, accounting, and consulting services. So we have a 5-minute break right now, and then we'll come back for the remaining 4 pitches and the audience voting contest. So thanks very much. So pitch number 5, Iwao Teraoka of Surfactants for Oil Recovery, otherwise known as Oil Recovery with CO2 Soap Complex.
Okay. Oh, thank you. My name is Iwao Teraoka. I'm from Polytechnic Institute of NYU, and this is a joint project with my colleague, Charles Marotucci. And we are developing soap molecules that can do 2 jobs. One is to capture CO2, the other is to enhance oil recovery. And our soap will capture CO2 at a power plant, and then it is transported to the oil well. And it is injected into the deposit of the oil with something else. And in the environment of high pressure, high temperature of the oil deposit, CO2 will be released. And then it will displace the oil held tightly in the pores of rock. And afterwards, oil will be coming out together with the soap molecules. And there are many CO2 sequestration agents like limestone and ethanolamine, but they bind CO2 too tightly, and release of CO2 is not easy. And the method, the molecule we are developing are reversible and can release CO2 in the environment of oil deposit. And then our soap is made from natural sources and can be recycled, so environmentally friendly. Next slide, please. And financial perspective. We are designing molecules of the soap, also the processing method of soap CO2 system, and we want to create revenue by licensing or startup. We are looking for research grant for $200,000 for 1 year. We are at very early stage at this moment. Next, economic advantage. the transportation and storage of CO2 by our soap molecule will be cheap and safe because it is stable. And the soap is cheap and made from plant origins that are widely available. And we are seeking partner in the oil exploring industry. And the customer perspective, we have a design for the soap, and actually our system will use metal ions to capture CO2, and when that is injected into the oil well together with something else, it will release CO2 to displace oil held in the pores of a rock. And the last figure illustration explains how our soap metal complex system work to capture CO2 and also recover oil from the oil deposit. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move right into the question section. Tom, can we start down with you? What questions would you like to ask Iwao?
So I know very little about this area. You certainly got my attention. Do you see this as more of an improved way to do enhanced oil recovery, or is it more of a carbon capture
We are seeking both functions. No, there are molecules that can do oil recovery. There are molecules that can do CO2 sequestration, but we are seeking dual functions.
Yeah, I think enhanced oil recoveries, work pretty well in recent decades, and it's sort of a pure economic calculation of whether it makes sense to make this big plant investment in order to recover additional oil. So there would be a huge advantage to this if you could retrofit existing oil recovery plants. Is that the case, or is there an incremental?
For that. And then we can design molecules that can even cater to each oil, different type of oil wells. So that small difference. Oil wells are different, and the environment different. Temperatures are different, and pressures are different. And then we probably need to design different surfactant, soap systems for each oil well.
Will you, though, have an impact on, these oil recovery systems have an existing plant to recycle the CO2 to continue to use it to recover the oil? Will your compound impact that CO2 recovery plant?
Yeah, in both ways. Yeah, yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there may be some thought required to how you make that compatible with the existing?
Yes,
or, yeah.
but we are very early stage, so we haven't come to that stage yet.
Is there any benefit of the combination of the surfactant and the CO2? Or have you just developed a really good surfactant that you happen to be able to combine with the CO2?
No, surfactant, the reason why we use CO2 is to displace oil. And of course, the best way to get CO2, the best place to get CO2 is the power plant, or where it is consumed, where it is produced. And we want to combine so that there's a cycle of carbon cycle from the oil well to the power plant.
Right. But if I want to use CO2 for oil recovery, I can inject it and you get a CO2 injector well and then produce more oil that way.
Yeah, but CO2 doesn't get into the pores of a rock.
Right, so that's my point. So do you have a combined effect that you're doing better than just CO2 or just a surfactant, sort of a combined benefit?
CO2 will displace the oil in the rock. The surfactant will help it. And then there's something else, I can't tell detail, but that will help.
Especially to a guy from Shell.
So the surfactant is more of an enabler, and it's a carrier of the CO2, and then under pressure it expands. And
it will make things more stable, so that it can be safely carried from the power plant to the oil well.
Okay, and then just the cost for capturing it from a power plant, do you know the number you need to hit?
At this moment, no idea.
Just conventional making CO2?
No, at this moment, I can't. We don't
I
have
think
any.
That's obviously your bogey.
Yeah. At this moment, no idea how much it will cost.
Okay.
Okay, so let's now move into the feedback, advice, and recommendations. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, so this could be really big. My advice is to get as much IP as you can, not one patent, but dozens of patents. Patent how you tie your shoes as you're walking up to turn on the machine. Yeah. It's because ultimately, if what you have is better than other systems. The only thing you have to protect yourself is patents. I can't tell the merits of what you've got, so but I would say that the lead time to actually prove it as a commercial product is probably more like 5 to 10 years, not 1 year. So as you get your grants, look towards a business plan that reaches milestones over a 5-year horizon.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about doing this business in a reasonable time period. So I would really look to get some experienced oil field engineering help to help you sort of analyze an existing oil recovery system. Don't worry about power plant sources of CO2, just piped in CO2 from somewhere, and what the kind of engineering requirements are to incorporate your technology into an existing enhanced oil recovery, and then sort of take that to pilots in an existing facility.
Okay, thank you. We'll certainly do that.
So one challenge with a novel enhanced oil recovery is always show its efficacy, because you sort of have to shut down the well, start your treatment, and say, did the well do better than it was before? And then you could say that because it's such a dynamic system, you'll never know because there's never negative control. So really showing that you're doing better than the current system is actually quite challenging. I think the link to a power plant CO2 is very challenging, because then it's very expensive, and there's cheaper CO2 than a power plant. I mean, that's sort of what's currently used for oil recovery. And I think it's intriguing if you find a combined effect of a better surfactant. So a better surfactant might have a market in itself, and then say if you can enhance that effect with CO2, but get to a quick demonstration in some sort of in vitro system, and then make it compatible with the current infrastructure, because that's where you're not able to change that much at a low enough cost.
Okay.
And so quick demonstration and finding the right system and then the right type of well, because not every petroleum system might be suitable for that EOR application. So really think about, once you address the market, and saying what type of reservoir is really suitable for my technology.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would kind of, you mentioned power plant and all the way going to enhanced oil recovery. I would try to focus on the downstream application. That's where the opportunity lies. As we talked a little bit about before, there isn't a huge interest now on the carbon capture side. It is all about how can you make those wells more productive.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent feedback. Well done, Iwao. Round of applause.
Thank you, Iwao. Okay, the next pitch is Ronald Anderson of Anderal Technologies. Ronald, you got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Again, my name is Ron Anderson. I have 2 partners in this project. One is Dr. John Roth from Penn State University and Dr. Elaine Mears from Clemson University. I have been a serial entrepreneur for the last 20 years, involved in restart of shutdown operations and 2 greenfield plants that were started, one being a aluminum mini mill in Quebec. I stumbled across this technology through Ben Franklin Technology Partners. It's a university-developed technology. What it is, electrically assisted manufacturing, EAM for short. EAM is a process of applying DC current at a low voltage and with mid to high amperage to the material, metallic materials, and it's pulsed. And what this does, it creates a more malleable material. The formability is far greater, and it allows you to do many things to the material that you can't do otherwise. We call it, making the impossible possible, making the difficult easier. The technology was developed over 8 years. It's now still in the labs somewhat, coming out of the labs as we try to commercialize this. Let me paint a picture for you of what's going on right now. Vehicles. Every vehicle has a number of die sets, large die sets to produce body panels. Roughly 25 to 35 die sets. When you see these die sets, they're mammoth pieces, and when they pull those out to put them in a press, they have to clean those die sets, put in a press, stamp out, say, 10,000 parts, take the dies back out, clean them up, put them back in storage into these warehouses. These warehouses are huge. It's just mammothly huge Indiana-style warehouses. Well, what's happening now with this technology, you can take and make these parts, not on that die set, but in what's called a double point incremental forming machine with the EAM technology, and with just 2 discs, much like a CNC, putting 2 discs in, you can form those parts. It's amazing. Ford has seen the savings of this. This is why Ford has put up $2.5 million along with Boeing, and received a $7.5 million grant from the Department of Energy to build a prototype facility in Illinois, or I shouldn't say Illinois, in Michigan. We have a prototype machine in Illinois right now. So it's starting to move. It could really change. It's a bit of a revolutionary technology that we think has a great future. Next slide. The revenue model consists of 3 pieces: engineering the application to the actual material, manufacturing the equipment, which is a power supply unit, as well as the software. And the last piece is licensing technology, which is either through royalties or licensing.
Good time. Okay, so let's move into questions. Mark, would you like to start?
Yeah. Have you done tests that make this applicable to all types of metals and compounds, or is it just specific types of metals?
No, we've done it over the years with all kinds of materials. We actually think titanium, magnesium, and stainless steel is a sweet spots for the technology. There's been a lot of work by Penn State, Clemson, Northwestern University, MIT, and New Hampshire on this technology. And actually, we have 3 patents. 1 patent is owned by Penn State and Ford, 1 is owned by Penn State Northwestern, and 1 is owned by Penn State solely.
So you don't own the patent?
No, we have the exclusive license agreement.
Use the mic.
Next question, Willem.
So how big is the machine you've built so far, and how big are the pieces you can make? Is this sort of a, could you see it as another way of 3D printing, or are you talking about much bigger pieces that you can make with this technology?
Well, Ford and Boeing into it for the large panels. The prototype machine we built was about 7 feet high, maybe a 3x3 cylinder-shaped piece. That was built by Penn State in Erie for Ford's purpose. But we try to focus on smaller parts. We're trying to focus on medical equipment primarily. So we're dealing with titanium.
When you go to a medical equipment potential customer, what are their sort of first and second objections to changing their manufacturing process?
Well, I've been a manufacturer for a long time. The first objection is it's new. Manufacturing is very difficult to change, very, very difficult to change. So you have to prove to them again and over again about the process and how it will work and how you can apply it. And that's the big thing. How do you apply it to their equipment that's already in place without having to buy new equipment?
Question, Tom?
Are people in general understand why this works? Is this something that somehow it magically makes the metal easier to work with?
No, I mean, they do understand. It's been studied for a lot of years, really since the 1980s. There was thoughts about DC current putting into material. You know, I think part of the magic came from the pulsing and a really long, intensive amount of research by Penn State primarily. Ford got involved in it with Penn State and drove it forward. They've been a sponsor along with Lincoln Electric as well. It's a situation where you have to engineer for every application, but it's been an ongoing development process. It does work. It's not just the heating of the material. It's far and above that.
Okay, now let's move into the feedback and advice so we can come back to Mark. What would you like to recommend?
Yeah, I think that last comment is, I'd like to give some advice on that. It sounds like it's such a huge market, huge opportunity. You got things going with Ford, Boeing, medical, and each one is customized. So you might want to think about going after the one that offers the most promise and the highest costs, productivity opportunity to get yourself scale to start with, and then build off of that versus trying to go after 3 mega markets.
Advice, Willem?
Yes, so first a comment. I think this is actually quite relevant to clean tech, because a lot of energy is used in industrial processes. And if you look at the future and you see you go away from fossil fuels, you get more renewables, it's always electricity. So I think it's very important to highlight that link between electricity and sort of your process, and that you actually become more energy efficient, but also that that source now of all of a sudden can become green, because a lot of industrial processes, like heat intensive processes, especially, you know, they can be very difficult to actually green up. So I think that's an important area. And then when we, for example, get an idea in like this in GameChanger, we all say like, yeah, there's really sort of a technology looking for a home. And I think that's really the key. You say you make the impossible possible, but it's not clear to me what you make possible. So in finding the thing that you make possible, I think that's your real market entry. And then from there, you can always build your technology staircase in the company and adding more applications. But really finding what you initially enable, and then at larger scale, highlight the greening. I think that's sort of a two-pronged strategy I'd recommend.
Advice, Andrew?
Well, it sounds really big and exciting, and the question for me would be, how do you avoid sort of blowing through a couple $100 million doing this? And I think I'll echo a previous comment in the sense that it's a really great strategy to find the customer who's got a bleeding from the neck problem, not a bleeding from the finger problem, and focus a lot of attention on that one customer and make sure you solve his problem perfectly and end up with a really nice low-cost solution for them, and then work your way up from there. And that may mean, let's say, if it's a medical device manufacturer, if it's a car manufacturer, having full-time help from somebody who's 30 years in that industry and knows the problems upside down and the devil in the details that could get you, and bringing them onto your staff right from the beginning.
And advice, Tom?
I'm glad to hear there are great ideas out there that can advance American manufacturing. I think the auto industry, if they're off their back and willing to work with you, really offers huge potential. Medical devices, their profit margins are so big, and that I'm not sure this is as impactful for them as it would be for large consumer goods the ones that still have metal in them.
Great advice. Nice
job.
job.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. So next up we have Scott Banta of ElectricBio Technologies. Scott, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Hi, my name is Scott Banta, and my co-founder, Alan West, and I are professors in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Columbia University, and we're launching our company, ElectricBio Technologies. There's several grand challenges in the energy space, one of which is incorporating renewable electricity into the aging electrical infrastructure, and the other is producing renewables, fuels, and chemicals from renewable resources. And we are developing a disruptive technology to produce fuels and chemicals, liquid fuels and chemicals, from carbon dioxide using electricity. We accomplish this by using 2 separate reactors. We have an electrochemical reactor that's able to take intermittent electricity, and this is the expertise of my collaborator, Alan West. And we couple that reactor to a biochemical reactor that contains genetically modified bacteria. And these bacteria are able to take carbon dioxide and produce liquid fuels or chemicals, and that is my area of expertise. We couple these 2 reactors together, and we've been able to demonstrate as a proof of concept that we're able to accomplish this, produce fuels and chemicals from electricity and air. So far, we've been able to, we've earned a $1.5 million grant from the Department of Energy's ARPA-E Electrofuels program, and we have already filed several patents, non-provisional patents on this through Columbia University. This summer, we've been working on this for several years. Now this summer, we're launching our customer discovery process. We're trying to now figure out the best way to propel this technology forward. We're looking for partners, we're looking for collaborators, we're looking for connections so that we can propel this into the $1 trillion electrical utilities market and into the $1 trillion biofuels and biochemicals market. And we think with your help, we can make this happen. So we're hoping to speak with you at the brewery later or make connections. You can reach us through the Columbia website. You can also email me directly at sbanta@electrobiotech.com. Next slide. So as I said, we're in the customer discovery phase, and we've developed a minimal viable product, or we're working on developing a minimal viable product. We have a hypothesis of how our business model is going to go, outlined in the diagram over there. We think we have the optimal platform for making electrofuels. We have the best way of doing this, and what we'd like to do now is partner with other companies and other entities where we can explore different metabolic pathways and different chemical production processes that we can put into our platform, and so we can go ahead and make fuels, chemicals, products that are desired by our different customers. So we think we have the best platform. We're looking to partner with different people to build our portfolio of chemicals and products that we can make. So I want to leave you with sort of a grand vision of where we see this going, right? If we go ahead and develop this technology and can put this into these key industries, first we figure in the utility space, we know there's a grand challenge of integrating renewable electricity into the grid, and we can imagine that if companies start to take on this technology, we will create a bunch of consumers of intermittent electricity, and this will be very valuable as we go ahead and build up and scale and develop an advanced grid infrastructure. And then also at the same time, we also know that there's tremendous challenges in working towards developing fuels and chemicals from renewable resources. The way that we're currently trying to address this is via agriculture, and there's a lot of effort right now, as everyone knows, in trying to make fuels and chemicals from plants. However, we're going to quickly run into serious problems with land and water usage. And we believe that this ultimately represents the next frontier in that line of research. Instead of trying to use plants to make fuels and chemicals, we think we're going to want to use renewable electricity, and we can use that in carbon dioxide, and together with our platform, make fuels and chemicals via that method.
And time. So let's move straight into Tom. Go for it. Clarification questions. Go ahead and dig into it.
Yes. It's hard enough to get one massive area done. Yeah. You seem to be marrying two areas that don't necessarily benefit from being married, because we have no shortage of electricity in this country. If you need electricity to drive your bioreactor, there's plenty of it already. So I'm a little confused as to why you wouldn't aim at the bioreactor side to get that right, because you don't need to reinvent electricity.
Well, I think actually part of this is, part of the advantage here is the opportunity for us to use off-peak electricity and electricity that comes from renewable intermittent sources. I don't know if I emphasize that enough, but one of the opportunities here is to be able to use intermittent sources. So if you're located near a windmill farm, or if we're not located near a solar place where there's periods of time where there's excess electricity, there's serious challenges with storing that electricity in batteries and other things that make intermittent sources of electricity, renewable electricity, difficult to work with. This is an opportunity to take that excess of electricity, instead of storing it in a battery, store it into the bonds, the chemical bonds of a fuel that you can then sell. And it sort of becomes an advanced storage solution. Instead of batteries, we could sell a liquid product, say a replacement for gasoline.
Next question, Andrew.
I noticed when I was at the RPE conference that they probably funded a half a dozen electrofuels projects. And could you explain in layman's terms why yours is the best of all of those?
So the electrofuels program funded several different groups, and you can sort of categorize them into 2 or 3 different ways. We're the only group pursuing this technology where we are able to couple our reactors together using iron as a redox mediator. And the advantage of what we're doing is we're able to use cells that naturally oxidize the iron redox mediator that's recycled between the 2 reactors, and our cells naturally fix carbon dioxide. Some of the other groups that are working on this are using redox mediators that don't frankly make a lot of sense. One of the competing technologies uses formate, where they're actually fixing carbon dioxide on the electrochemical side of the reactor, which is very inefficient. Ours, we're using cells that naturally evolved to fix the carbon dioxide, and that's critical because we think that's eventually going to be a rate-limiting part of the process.
Next question, Willem.
So what have you done around seeing how you'd scale up this technology? For example, is the electrolyzer on the left of the picture, is that how big can you build these things? And if you think about scale, do you have to build more of these units, or can you build really, really big units and you only need a few?
So we've put a lot of time and effort into thinking about this, and that's one of the huge advantages to our process is both of these systems, the electrochemical system, the biological system, can operate intermittently and need to be coupled by liquid, but they can be decoupled in as they're scaled. So we actually know that there's technology available to scale up the bioreactor, and that's pretty well known. On the electrochemistry side, yes, we're gonna be able to make very large scale facilities that are gonna look like, as you said, an electrolyzer, maybe in the vein of something like a chloralkali plant. The facility would look like that, and we've done a lot of analysis on how to scale the 2 things together, and I can talk to you more about it later. But yes, we thought about that, and yes, it can scale very readily.
And question mark.
Yeah. So on the storage concept, the cost that you're trying to hit is obviously other battery technologies that are rapidly coming down. So have you thought about, I mean, just staying on that side, have you thought about how you're going to catch up to the amount of capacity and cost reduction that they're seeing?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, so the difference would be with the battery, what you're trying to do is capture the energy and put it right back onto the grid. We're actually looking at transmuting that energy into something else, right? So what we would like to do instead of trying to store the energy temporarily and put it back into the grid with what you do like a battery, we can imagine if we have the extra electricity, instead of storing it temporarily, converting it into aviation fuel and selling it that way. So we think the economics are completely different. There could be a market for trying to have our product with a price point where we're not just temporarily storing it. It's sort of comparing apples to oranges, I think.
Okay, now to advice and recommendations. Tom, go ahead.
Well, it sounds like you're onto something. My advice is, have people like me come by and really explain it, because this is too much to compact into a 3-minute discussion. It seems like you've got the attention of a lot of big groups and are starting to get big money, so you must be doing something right.
Advice, Andrew.
I'm totally flummoxed by this one. So there's a lot of venture-backed companies that went into biofuels, and they were really dependent on all the various levels of government subsidies and tax incentives and so on. So if you could work up an economic model for this, which now anticipated ultimately over time that those incentives are going away and your fuel looks competitively priced, I think that would go a long way to convincing.
So I think in general, it's an interesting space to think how you go from electrical energy to chemical energy. Because again, as I mentioned before, if you think most renewable solutions, solar and wind, are really electrical, and there's always a need for carbon. So it's good to sort of marry the two. But then the question is, how can you play where? I think it's the real challenge. So peak shaving, it sounds really nice, but then again, you have a very expensive manufacturing plant that can only operate when electricity is really cheap. So it's very difficult to recover that capital. So you have to think about, what on an ongoing basis, where's my electricity going to come from? And then, a lot of people sort of propose these plays, well, I just put in solar panels, but then green electricity has a relatively high value as you generate it. So really getting it right, sort of the scale and the amount of electricity, where it comes from, and how much you might do from peak shaving, and where the rest is going to come from. I think that's the key. And on the CO2 side, it looks like we finally got a market for CO2 as people focus on capturing CO2. So it's interesting, but don't underestimate the cost of sort of concentrated CO2 that's required for these types of reactors.
Yeah, I would kind of go on the same line as far as the cost. And obviously, getting back to Andrew's comment, cost of a battery on the generating side, the cost for other liquid fuels is your other target you need to hit. And then I would say, these are going to have to be massively costly CapEx plants. So if you can figure out a way to utilize some existing infrastructure, I think that would be a great way to try to overcome those.
Excellent feedback. Nice job, Scott.
Thank you.
Round of applause. Thank you, Scott. Well done.
So our final pitch tonight is David Sutton of Phosolar. David, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. This is going to be difficult because I have to teach a lot of things. One is it's Phosolar, phosphorescent solar technology. Phosolar. Got it? Phosolar. Okay. Second is I'm president of Phosolar Blankets, which is part of Phosolar USA. Phosolar USA has spent years looking at how can we use phosphorescence and solar technology to create a single device, something that works. Catholic University out of Belgium did very well with combining the two as a single solar cell, but it's way too expensive. Phillips Petroleum took a look at what can we do with reflectors, what can we do with awnings and films, chemicals that can be applied to cause phase shift of wavelengths, all kinds of stuff's been done. But I went to Phosolar and I said, I know you've got expertise in this. This is what you should be doing, not going crazy. Let's make something simple, and here it is. What we do is we take a blanket of Phosolar crystals, and it's in a blanket because it's got to be in a quilt. If you take these fluorescent chemicals, pigments, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah, speak into the microphone.
and dissolve them into a paint or a pigment or a dye or whatever you try to do, sputter them onto films, you lose their persistence. Large crystals will have to be captured into the pockets of a blanket or a quilt, and then that has to be put over the solar cells. So what we're doing is taking the solar electricity that's all that energy that's being wasted on the rest of the roof, and at night taking that blanket and pulling it over your solar cells. So, you know, the efficiency of the solar cell is constantly going to go up. The technology of solar cells are constantly going to go up, but they're ignoring half of the roof. If that house were facing east, at night I could bring the same amount of electricity back to it at night. 24-hour a day is what our concept has proven. Our prototype is going to be self-financed because the people at Phosolar and now my partners include brilliant quantum engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. My patent attorney is a chemist. So all of my partners are ready to move forward with changing your solar energy panel to a 24/7, double the output.
10 seconds.
Okay, who here has an electric bill? Who here would like to take the electric bill, turn it around? If you're paying $300 a month of electric, wouldn't it be nice for $3,000 one-time investment to have them pay you the same amount of money you're spending now?
And time. So I'm going to hold you right there, and let's move into the questions. So go ahead, Tom. We can move into you. We can clarify the pitch and go.
I don't know. You had me into that last bit because that doesn't sound like a normal business model. Well, so on your point, I've seen little green phosphorescent panels. What's the efficiency of light radiating on them to what then hours later you can get back out of them and put through a solar PV panel?
Well, the advantage
the
advantage of having the pockets is we can put more than one pigment. So we're not talking about yellow-green. We're talking about blue, yellow, green, orange, many pigments. It also allows us, using more than one pigment, to use larger crystals that have persistence. The persistence that everyone thinks of is, oh, it lasts a while. We, at Proof of Concept, are out past 12 hours and are working with the University of Georgia Research Group, and they're taking it to 30 hours. So you could have 8 hours of electricity and result in 30 hours of electricity.
Next question, Andrew.
That sounds like a huge breakthrough in the last couple of years, because I know people working on this stuff were looking at hundreds of microseconds as recently a few years ago. So, to have those kinds of materials, are these materials that can be readily and cheaply made, or are they so exotic that you have a real manufacturing process issue?
I don't want to make you cry. The Chinese are building them for me right now.
Is there any trigger? Is there any trigger to sort of release the photon energy after you absorb the energy at night? So what prevents you at daylight to sort of emit that light right away again?
If you get 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of night, it's just going to absorb more. When you open it up and it goes back to where it belongs, you're just going to absorb more light. And you're not going to waste excess light, because the phosphorescent solar cell isn't radioactive, and we're not getting more light than we're taking in. So the more light we can take in the blanket, the better for the solar cell at night.
Yeah, but the light sort of leaves, as we capture the
Yes.
light, it goes away during the day as well. Of
Yes,
course,
it
it's
does.
coming in. Because so there's no trigger that you can sort of avoid it and say trigger the reaction one way or the other. So it's always an ongoing reaction of capturing and release.
You want to know our resources in quantum entanglement? We do have a branch working on quantum entanglement, which would actually prevent the photons from leaving and the electrons from jumping, but that's not part of the fact that I can double your electrical output. That's in the future, and that's another professor in Australia that we'll talk about later.
Last question, Mark.
So you're basically competing against other solar plus a battery. So is your cost at or below the $1 a watt for a solar panel from China?
Right now, we're looking at, with the pigments we're using, we're looking at $3 a square foot for the panel. And that's about after rebate cost of a solar cell. However, we're talking about my prototype. So whether our American manufacturers or our Canadian contacts and factories, or whether China is able to ramp up and make all of these pigments as persistent as they claim, and whether or not the University of Georgia and Catholic University in Belgium get more funding and can move this forward and take our persistence levels and our energy levels up higher, it's just going to make things better. And actually, this all ties into pH OLEDs, because all the phosphoruses tie into the phosphorescence. So the technology is actually snowballing.
Okay, so let's move into the last round of feedback for the night. So we'll come back to you, Tom. Advice?
Yeah, I think I would work on the pitch, because you left a lot of very big open questions, and you had a way of answering questions that didn't build the credibility in what you're trying to sell. So, think of more of the commercial application and the skepticism people would normally bring towards a product like this, and maybe give more sort of who else has validated the actual basic economics of using a phosphorus type material to capture photons and then release them later.
Advice, Andrew?
Unlike the last one, I have great advice for you here, which may be completely obvious to everybody in the room, but you have the opportunity to have a really nice business model, which is sell blankets on an OEM basis to all the existing manufacturers and distributors of panels, and don't go into the solar residential business yourself, and you may have a wonderful business if this all works.
Advice, Willem?
Yeah, so actually you have to bring sort of what you call the blanket back on the panel. I guess it's more amenable for residential compared to large sites, because then the physics won't work. But then, so if you do residential, I think you have to think about, are you really putting a bag of chemicals sort of on somebody's roof that might have some concern? And then what's the longevity, and how does the mechanics work? If that thing ruptures or not. So I think you might need to, next to the mechanics, really think about the engineering and how this is work in practice. And then what's the tipping point? Because if solar panels become cheap enough soon enough with the battery, then it might be an easier solution if the surface is there. Because in this case, you still need the double surface for the solar and the blanket. So you can put twice the panels up unless you're cost competitive with the battery. So you have to make sure that in practice it is as good as you think it is.
Final feedback of the night.
Yeah, and I think going back to Tom's statement, your customers are going to be solar people who have solar or want solar. You need to talk in terms of what they are already understanding in the marketplace, as far as the cost per watt or amount of capacity factor and all that kind of stuff. So. And then going back to Andrew's comment, you may think there may be a nice business model making, laid up blankets. My daughter would probably like one.
Excellent feedback. Nice job. Round of applause. Well done. Okay.
Thank you so much, David. So now is your opportunity to select the winners of tonight's contest, both the presenters and also the panelists. So you should have all received an email from me. At least everybody that registered online in advance will have done so. Anybody here received an email from me lately? Okay, excellent. If you didn't receive an email, you can type in this URL and you can vote that way. It's uls.bz, as in ultralight startups, /FE Future Energy -June 13. You should be able to vote that way. And while we are voting, we will make a couple more announcements. So Future Energy is hosting at least 4 more events this year. 3 in-person events, 1 here in New York City in November, 1 in Silicon Valley in October, and 1 in Boston in September. We're also hosting our first virtual version of this event. Get that URL up one more time. Sure. Okay. So, ultralight startups and future energy works well in a dense hub of innovation like New York City or Boston or Silicon Valley, where there's lots of investors and lots of startups. However, there's startups all over the world and all over the country that are not in Silicon Valley or Boston or New York City, and those people will be able to participate in future energy in the future through our virtual events, the first of which is tentatively scheduled for next month, so you'll all be informed about that. I hope you can participate online. Everybody have this URL now? Okay. So if you didn't get it, then it's too late. We have one more announcement, which is Jim Eloise is going to come up and tell us about Power Bridge, which is a fascinating new program here in New York City.
Thank you, Graham. I'm going to just take about a minute or so and tell you about a new initiative that's funded by NYSERDA. They funded 3 new proof of concept centers across the state, 2 of which are down here in the New York City area. One team led by NYU Poly and teamed with, Emily, if you'd like to come up, join me. NYU Poly is teamed with CUNY. Columbia, where I work, we teamed with Stony Brook University, Brookhaven National Lab, and the Cornell NYC Tech. And these proof of concept centers are tasked
into the microphone. A little closer into the
sorry. These proof of concept centers are tasked with getting clean energy technologies out of our institutions and into commercialized entities with a preference towards startups. The 2 downstate proof of concept centers, we've joined our forces a bit, and we're calling ourselves Power Bridge New York so that we can take advantage of our proximity and some of our connections. And rather than duplicate activities, we will, and compete, we would do them together. So we'll have bigger, better events. In addition to funding the projects to do, for example, a prototype build or in-field testing, we'll also build some infrastructure around that will help them out. Things like skills seminars, boot camps, bring in law firms, as we discussed earlier, that does talks about the trials and tribulations of startups, intellectual property, all these kinds of things that will help them get their product and their technology ready for commercialization. So tonight, I'm happy to take any business cards or make any connections. We're going to be looking between now and the fall when we launch this to build up our network, to get advisors, to get mentors that will be connecting with these projects. And on an ongoing basis while we do this over the next 5 years. So we'd love to hear from the folks who'd like to be involved in some way, and happy to make some introductions tonight. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim. Okay, is anybody here still voting? All the votes are in. All the votes are cast. So just to remind you, the prizes to the startups come from Surge Accelerator in Houston, a free interview there. $1,000 of credits at Amazon Web Services, free application at CleanTech Open Northeast, and a free month of co-working at NYC Acre, a co-working space here in New York City. So don't forget where to go for drinks, which is right across the street at Heartland Brewery. And as you have all voted, I am now going to show the winners. Here we have it. David Mahfouda of Bandwagon, come on up to the front of the room. And second place, Ron Anderson. Is that correct? Come on up. Ron, come on up. And Scott Banta, I believe, is number 3. Crowd voting. Congratulations, guys. Now, really, for the really big prize. Really big prize. Bragging rights and our eternal gratitude. Best panelist, as voted by you. Andrew Garman. Congratulations. Well done. Okay, so we will see you all across the street at Heartland Brewery. It's very easy to find. You walk out the front door and you just cross 6th Avenue and it's right there. You can't stay in this room for too long, so I encourage you to migrate there as soon as possible.
Thank you.